Hi, it's Dwyer. It's February the 4th, 2026. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Folks, let's talk about the Super Bowl. Let's talk about Super Bowl MVP. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, made an earlier video. My point in that video was to argue that neither team is going to be able to run the football rather than pick individuals. And understand, folks, betting patterns have changed. Now, the big bets are actually on prop bets, right? So the casino is giving you an alluring looking offer, knowing that they've already run an algorithm on the player involved, and they already know versus certain types of defense, man-to-man, zone, how the player usually does, right? They'll have a standard deviation, and they'll know the team they're playing against has a defense that's 30% above average, so they'll give you a number that doesn't reflect the 30% in increased adversity that your offensive player is going to face, right? So just recognize that so much money is bet these days on props that it's hard to get an edge on the casino. So since I believe neither team's going to run the football, right, and I'm in right now a playoff pool with guys I bet with on fantasy, where I'd be helped if Walker of the Seahawks actually did well, right? But rather than bet on Walker or others, the bets I took so far on the Super Bowl are the unders on team rushing totals, right? For one team, I got 106 yards. For the other team, I got 100 yards. I consider both a bargain, right? I don't think either team's going to be able to run the football unless, well, put it this way, they'll be rushing attempts. If one team jumps out to a big lead, they're going to try to milk the clock. So whether or not they're gaining yards, if you're up by 3 scores, let's say you're up by 20, and we've seen lopsided scores in Super Bowls, folks. If you're up by 20, they're going to hand the ball off to whoever, can kill 30 seconds on the clock, right? That 1 yard gain, it's okay if it drains the clock and gets us closer to a win. So rather than take individual running backs and bet the under, I'm betting the under for both teams on rushing totals. So now let's talk MVP. I heard Warren Sharp this morning on a numbers game on VSiN. By the way, that's available on YouTube. That's also available on Rumble. And my God, he's encyclopedic. I like Warren Sharp, but the analysis is too statistical for me, right? Let's just do this on a macro level. Here's what I want people to realize. If neither team can run the football, there's going to be a lot of passing. The best wide receiver on the field is the guy who led the league this year in reception yards. That's Jackson Smith-Njigba, in arguably the biggest game he's played to date, the 2022 Rose Bowl. And Njigba had his biggest game, 347 receiving yards. He was the Rose Bowl's offensive MVP. Right? And Njigba, of course, went to Ohio State. Understand he set the school record for most catches in a game, 15 catches, and he did so twice. Right? I need for folks to understand this is a guy who made the Pro Bowl last season, not this one, not just this one, but last season too, when he caught 100 balls. Understand, this year he caught 119 balls. He had 163 passes thrown toward him. But understand, he's not a 4-4 guy. This guy did not get into the 4-4s at the combine or in tryouts for teams. No, this guy's a 4-5-2 guy. Now that's important here. Understand, Jerry Rice was not a burner. Chris Carter was not a burner. Michael Irvin was not a burner. So unlike burners like Terry Glenn, who, are running deep routes every play, the receivers I just named, they would run a variety of routes. Right? All of them, Hall of Famers. They couldn't take the top off a defense like a Randy Moss. They weren't freak athletes like a Randy Moss, right? Moss could out-leap most guys. Moss, of course, was a basketball player in high school, right? On the same team as White Chocolate. Jason Williams, the former NBA guard. Well, Jackson Smith-Njigba is not a freak athlete, right? Rather, this 6-footer, right? He's not tall like some of the other guys. This 6-footer is what I call a change of direction guy. Folks, he's going to be all over the field. He's going to be the focal point of the offense, in my opinion. Right? Understand, a guy who has 100 or more catches the last 2 years in the NFL, a guy who's had 163 balls thrown at him this year, is going to be actively involved in the offense for this game, particularly given that this is a guy who has always been high level. Right? Coming out of high school, he was 5-star. He was rated the 5th highest wide receiver in the country. Right? Now, there are words we don't like to hear when we talk about wide receivers, right? When you say someone's a possession receiver, oh, that has a negative connotation, doesn't it? Possession receiver, that doesn't sound like a, Devontae Adams or Randy Moss, right? Just understand that this season, this last one, the one that's not yet completed, is the first year that Jackson Smith-Njigba has topped 15 yards per reception. Last year he made the Pro Bowl and he was at 11.3 yards per reception. So what does that mean? Just understand, Mike Vrabel, defensive guy, has some cornerbacks who are excellent against deep threat wide receivers. Right? You can put, Pro Bowler Christian Gonzalez on a guy and, he'll do his Deion Sanders impersonation. He'll shut down part of the field. Right? The problem comes when the guy is actually a possession receiver and you don't know where he's going to be. And he's a change of direction guy. In other words, if I'm dealing with a Lance Allworth, if I'm dealing with a Terry Glenn, right? If I'm dealing with some burner who's going to beat me deep, and I have top end speed, I can hang step for step. I might even be faster. than the wide receiver. Look at Terrell Buckley's speed and speed of some other DBs. Right? The best athletes on the field tend to be DBs. Right? Three of the best I've seen are Rod Woodson, Deion Sanders, and I forget the third name. That's the peril of a live video. But just understand, with the change of direction guy, it's more difficult because he's not running the same deep routes. Right? The guy is actually lined up. He's cutting underneath. He's doing curl routes. Because he's change of direction, he might have better coordination than these track guys who are accustomed to building up a head of steam. Now, I mention all of this because, incredibly, the wide receiver here who had 163 balls thrown his way and who caught 119 of them and who led the entire league, not just the NFC, in receiving yards this year, you're getting him at greater than 5-1 to win MVP. Right? You have a hedge here. The hedge, again, since I don't believe that they're going to be able to run the football. And before I give the hedge, let me point out that we understand anything can happen. Right? There could be a Larry Brown who gets multiple picks, right? A defensive player. There could be a Ray Lewis, a linebacker who just takes over the game. Both of these teams are defensively blessed. Right? There could be a Von Miller who takes over the game. But from this seat, passing for both teams is going to be crucial. Your hedge on Jackson Smith and Jigba to win the MVP, that's where you're really going for profit, is on Sam Darnold, who's also in the passing game for Seattle, to win the MVP. You're getting him at a little bit better than even money. Right? Be a sophisticated gambler. If you're getting 5-1 on option A and even money on option B, you can bet twice as much on option B as option A. And if Sam Darnold wins MVP, let's say I bet $2 on Sam Darnold and $1 on Jackson Smith and Jigba. If Sam Darnold wins MVP, I win $2. So even when I subtract the $1 that I bet on Jackson Smith and Jigba, I've made a profit. Of course, your real hope is that Jackson Smith and Jigba wins the MVP. At 5-1, you get $5 back. Minus the $2 that you bet on Sam Darnold, you net $3. But understand the risk involved. You lose it all. You lose it all if somebody else wins MVP. Now, Stephon Diggs, he's good. He's not Jackson Smith and Jigba. Right? Let me point out, too, that there is a concern among some. It's so pronounced that the alleged injured athlete actually addressed it. Right? You have a doctor who's looked at film, and he believes that Drake May has a problem with his throwing shoulder. Right? His argument is Drake May can pick up luggage. There are photos online of Drake May picking up luggage in the last few days. Right? But that doesn't mean he can reach over his head. Right? As Dr. Chow put it on a telecast, that doesn't mean he can put his luggage in the overhead compartment on a plane and close the door. Right? Now, Drake May talked about it. He said, hey, I'm ready. Right? Here's what you need to realize. While Sam Darnold has been a journeyman and has been on a number of teams, he had a very good year last year with Minnesota, didn't he? Right? Drake May, second-year quarterback. I'm biased against second-year quarterbacks. I don't think they know enough I'll concede he's been going up against some of the best defenses in the league. The Houston Texan defense, the Denver Bronco defense. But folks, he has not been a world beater in the playoffs, and he's going up against another elite defense. One with 2 weeks to study him. Also, Drake May's immensely talented. I believe he should be the MVP this year. Right? Let me just say, he makes certain mistakes. He's going to be under pressure here. Seattle has a pass rush. Right? He does not have great pocket awareness. The quarterback who fades back, some lineman is running up behind him, ready to sack him. And the quarterback, let's call him Pat Mahomes, can just sense that some guy's running up behind him, just off the time spent on the play, just off the way the linemen are in front of him. Maybe he can hear footsteps, but a Pat Mahomes knows when he needs to pull the ball down and protect against a fumble or move in a certain direction to the top of the pocket. Maybe that's Pat right now. No, I'm teasing. I don't know Pat Mahomes. But let's just say the Pat Mahomeses of the world, the Matthew Staffords of the world. These are guys who just know when the pocket's collapsing. Drake May, as good as he is not yet in that club. Right? He's also lax on ball security. He holds the ball a little bit loose. And understand, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because once linemen see that, once their colleagues at other games have succeeded in causing Drake May to fumble the football, then every lineman who gets close to Drake May is trying to knock the ball away. Right? It's a little bit different with some quarterbacks. Not with Drake May. So let's just say New England doesn't have this dynamic of a wide receiver who you can move all over the field. Have a sustained passing game. Sustained. Right? And, if things work out for Jackson Smith-Njigba, I'm not saying he makes it to 347 yards like he did in the 2022 Rose Bowl, but he could easily get 8 catches or more in the game. Right now we understand if he's catching balls thrown by Sam Darnold, just as Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to get receiving yards, Sam Darnold's going to get passing yards. But at some point, if the game goes a certain way, the numbers are going to look more impressive for the wide receiver who has 10 catches, 12 catches, right? Who, this year had over 1,700 receiving yards. In other words, if Jackson Smith-Njigba gets numbers equal to 40% of Seattle's offensive yards, then unless somebody else scores a lot of touchdowns, or unless Sam Darnold passes for a lot of touchdowns to somebody else, JSN is likely going to be your MVP. Right? The hedge I like here is JSM at 5-1, hedged with Darnold to win the MVP. Right? Let me say that if New England wins the Super Bowl, it's highly unlikely, given history. I know about Chuck Howley, but it's highly unlikely, given history, that any Seahawk is going to be awarded the trophy. Right? So, just understand, if you're of the mindset that the team favored by casinos right now, the Seattle Seahawks, right? The team, quite frankly, that faced the vastly superior opposition and that's playing in a stadium they know well because it's an NFC Western stadium, right? Understand how heavy the competition was that the Seahawks have faced. They've played the Rams 3 times this year, right? Including in the conference championship game. Recognize that the Niners had a chance late in the season, late December, to get the 1 seed in the NFC. Both of those teams are NFC Western teams. Right? Just understand how much heavier the competition is. Contrast that with the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills will have a new head coach next year. The Miami Dolphins will have a new head coach next year. Right? The Jets weren't within sniffing range of 500. Right? So you're talking about, teams with vastly different experiences in the past. You're talking about a young quarterback who's still figuring things out. You're talking about, a Patriot team that, in my opinion, doesn't have an analog to Jackson Smith and Jigba. Right? These change of direction guys at wide receiver who you could put all over the field negates the stardom of, let's say, a lockdown corner, right? A Patrick Surtain or what have you. I understand the DBs on the Patriots are, world class, right? Is the defense collectively going to be able to figure things out if Jackson Smith and Jigba is suddenly in the slot? Right? The head coach in Seattle is a rising star. He's had 2 weeks. He has a wide receiver here who has a history of a lot of catches. Right? Multiple years in the pros of 100 catches or more. And, of course, 2 games at Ohio State with 15 catches in each game. That's how I see it. Let me also make a few comments on Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, I'm a fan, right? I believe that being an NFL quarterback takes a few years. I don't care how talented you are, right? Understand, the Commander quarterback, Jaden Daniels, made the Pro Bowl at quarterback his first year, right? I know the Pro Bowl's taking a beating, given that Shedeur Sanders was in the Pro Bowl this year, but just understand, Daniels has the accomplishments to back it up because he, of course, made it to the conference finals last year, right? But I believe he has a lot to learn. He's still figuring things out. He doesn't know how to stay healthy. He's taking hits. I'm not blaming guys for getting injured in the pocket. I am blaming guys for running out of the pocket without realizing the injury risk. Right? So to me, here I see Drake May, who hasn't exactly been carrying the team in the playoffs. Right? I see him against a very rough Seattle defense, right? Sam Darnold, he's been around successful teams. Just understand, Minnesota was the cat's meow last year during the regular season, right? Understand, where they're playing Levi Stadium here used to be Sam Darnold's home stadium. Right, this is a guy who is going to be in a familiar, very familiar stadium for the Super Bowl. Right, this is a guy who has the best receiver in the game. This is a guy who has a great defense, who's been clamping down on tougher opponents than the opponents Drake May has played. Right, let's be real too. He faces the Texans. The Texans are missing Nico Collins. Folks, Nico Collins made the Pro Bowl this year. Right? They're playing the Denver Broncos. Denver has a shot at an easy field goal. They don't take it. Of course, later, the Patriots come from behind. They have a shot at an easy field goal. They actually kick it. Right? Given the weather conditions of the second half, we aren't sure what we saw in that game. But it didn't look like Patriot domination. Right? So, yeah, I'm leaning toward Super Bowl MVPs of Jackson Smith and Jigba, 5-1, hedged with Sam Darnold at a little bit better than even money. That's how I see it, and of course I do like the unders on the rushing totals for both teams. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comments section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.